you don't want to do it wrong because the stakes are way too high.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me that the recommendation here might be, for the first time ever on the podcast, is to don't insulate your house.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Let that conditioned air escape.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast. I am joined today by editor Matt Millham and overlord Rob Yagid.
Hey.
What's up?
As you guys know, this is our weekly discussion of the craft and science of working on houses. We're happy you can sit here and geek out with us for an hour or so. We've got some particularly geeky questions today. They're hard questions, and they're really high stakes questions. So let's just jump right in. Well, I guess before we jump in, let me remind you of our email address and some other housekeeping. fhbpodcast@taunton.com. That's where you can send us questions and topics for future shows. You can also, during the course of the discussion today, we're going to be talking a lot about some other resources that you can look at, whether it's photos or other papers or links to articles. And for those, you can go to finehomebuilding.com/podcast, and you'll see a rundown of the show notes for this and every other episode that Mr. Michael Moran-Alterio puts together with his blood, sweat, and tears. And you can also watch us on the website, watch a video of this podcast recording on finehomebuilding.com/podcast or on YouTube. So spread the love to your friends. Tell them about us. We've been appreciating all the nice reviews on iTunes lately, too, by the way. Thank you for that. Not quite in the top 10 yet, but we're getting there.
Getting close.
We're getting close. Watch out, Joe Rogan.
Coming for you.
Rob, don't we still have we have some promo offers going on still too, don't we? Let's see, I have it right here. We have 20% off the regular price of the magazine. If you haven't yet subscribed, you can sign up for 1 year for $30. That's finehomebuilding.com/pod offer. Highly encourage you to do that. We have every article pretty much we've ever written available online. If you want to get on there, you can either have a print subscription mailed to you, or you can get online and have access to all of our archives. Why let the nerdery stop with just an hour-long podcast every week?
The nerdery.
Let that nerddom fly. Let that freak flag fly, everybody. Okay, I'm going to jump right in because this first question right out of the gate, I'm going to burn you guys right out of the gate. Get them on their heels, Jeff.
Right. Hit them hard.
Question 1. Thomas writes, since you guys suckered me into a subscription with that sweet deal, I thought I would ask you a question. You answered my previous question for someone else in episode 63 about how to support a floor that had old wooden beams that were mortised into brick. So this situation was in a basement, I believe that guy wrote us a question about, and he had beams and pockets, and the ends of the beams or the joists were rotting. So we handily solved that problem, Robert. I'm planning on putting a footing and stud walls in the basement to support the first floor. Okay, so he's doing the same thing in his basement, it sounds like. A+. My next question, though, what is the perfect wall assembly for the brick walls? I plan on furring out the external walls and putting in insulation. How do I get proper air sealing, not trap moisture next to the brick, get solid R values, and do anything else needed to increase the comfort level of my 1840s farmhouse? And we have some photos of this lovely structure. It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
It's in Massachusetts. My inclination is full sheets of 2 inches of rigid foam inside the brick and putting 2x6s with mineral wool inside that. What kind of chicanery can I get away with since the studs won't have to support the wall above and only have to support their own weight and the sheetrock? Did you guys happen to see the second picture of, he looks like he started pulling off the plaster on inside?
I didn't. Matt did.
And look at the studs. I mean, they're not really studs. It looks like they're just
like 1x?
No, it looks like a 2x10 on the flat.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm looking at.
I mean, like, it looks like they have, they just fastened 2x on the flat to the inside face of the brick wall, and then they attached the lath to that and then plastered. So when I first read this email, I was like, great, this is going to be an awesome question. We can dig in. We can tell people how to retrofit insulation while making sure that there's airflow behind the brick veneer. And then I went, then I just kept on reading a little bit further, and then I was like, yeah, it's gonna be great. This house is gorgeous. We can help this guy with his old house. And then I scrolled down the email and I saw the next photo of the interior of the wall, and I went, oh crap, this thing looks like it's a double wide brick wall, or like multi-wide. Like it's not a veneer.
Right. It's a load bearing.
This is
wall.
bearing.
Right.
And I didn't, when I initially read him saying the beam was bearing, I know he's talking about the basement, but I assumed that maybe this is doing the same thing. And then you see the photo of those studs on the flat, which are not going to support a floor system, and you go, oh no.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, but maybe we'll still be all right. And then I scroll down a little farther, and it's like, thanks, look forward to your thoughts from Massachusetts. And I was like, oh no, even worse.
I think I was like in the same boat where I just like kind of went through the catalog of like assemblies that are in my head. I was like, oh yeah, okay. I think I probably would have ended up very quickly to what his proposed strategy was, which was like just furring out the interior, getting some kind of vapor impermeable, airtight assembly, insulation against the brick, and then bulk filling, and then
air impermeable.
Air impermeable. Well,
we can get into it.
We'll get into it for sure. But then very quickly I realized, holy smokes, got to slow down here, because this is not a conventional assembly where you could kind of employ a lot of the things that we've been talking about on this podcast since episode 1.
Would you say it's a goat rodeo?
I'm going to say it just because I want to say it. Yeah, it's for sure a goat rodeo.
Yeah. Could quickly be. I was a little confused when I first read the question, because I thought he was maybe talking about the basement, that it was maybe like a brick foundation.
Yeah.
And I came up with a solution for that. And then as soon as I realized, oh, wait, no, this is the living space.
Would your solution lead to a crumbling foundation, do you think?
No, the solution would have been just to basically cut like a narrow trench next to it and pour in some liquid foam that expands just like spray foam and fills that gap.
But next to what?
Next to the foundation. Like
on the outside?
Yeah, on the outside.
Oh, interesting. Matt, you're fired.
Yeah. That's a crazy upstate New York hippie solution.
Yeah, no, that actually...
You mean you would have excavated a trench and then thrown hay bales down there? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. Just load that thing up with grass.
Matt's every solution is to convert the house into a hay
just a hay pile, I think.
Hay pile, yeah.
Just live in a hayloft.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so we've sufficiently teased the fact that this is terrifying, this question. And I hope that Thomas hasn't started this work yet, because this can be extremely dangerous work. In fact, I might go out on a limb and say that of all of the risky assemblies, risky retrofit situations, I'm not sure that there's one that's more risky than dealing with multi-width wide. Am I saying it wrong again?
Either way. No, both are fine.
So of all the things, I'm not sure that there's anything more risky than dealing with old buildings that are multi-wide brick walls in cold climates, because there's so many variables that can go into the potential failure of that wall. And if you don't understand your wall and don't get the details right, it will fail. Like, it's not like it won't work that well. Like, your house will fall apart. And you won't have much time, according to this one thing that we were, I think, both talking about before. We hadn't really gotten into it. But Martin Holliday, Green Building Advisor guy, wrote a thing pretty much just about this. That might be something worth looking at. Or I will certainly throw the link to that Martin Holliday summary. Most of what he's kind of summarizing quickly is 100-page research paper written by the folks over at Building Science Corporation, which it's free online. I'll throw the link to that. And it's 100 pages, if that gives you any indication of how complicated this can get. But let's back up, and just the real basic here's what we're worried about. Okay, so what I mentioned earlier, I thought it was a brick veneer. Brick veneer walls are a different story, because you have a wood frame structure. The wood frame structure is structural. I mean, it's supporting the walls, the floors and everything else above it. So the brick veneer on the outside is window dressing. Right. Now, you need to make sure that there's a gap between that brick veneer and the house, and you need to make sure that there's good flow behind it for the bricks to stay dry. So when the bricks get wet, they soak up the moisture, air can flow behind it, and it can drain and dry out. Yeah, you got weep holes at the bottom. If not airflow, at least you have weep holes and some. So that what happens when the brick gets wet, the sun comes out, After the rainstorm's over, you get a nice little rainbow over the house, and the sun pushes the moisture farther into the brick. If you don't have the ability for air to flow behind that brick, it will never, the moisture won't be picked up and released from the structure. It'll just be sitting there. Now, in an old leaky house with that setup, you get a lot of energy flowing through the wall from the inside, and that can help dry the backside of the bricks too. So it's another one of these things houses need to breathe, right? It's a very forgiving structure when you have no insulation. But as we always point out, that's not the solution. The solution is not to live in a leaky house. It's to just understand how to do it the right way. So all of this to say that if it was brick veneer, his proposed solution is a good one, I think. Assuming that you have weep holes and all that stuff.
That it was detailed correctly. Yeah,
when it goes to a multi-width brick wall, I'm going to say it different every time I say it, just for fun.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm paying attention. See how many different ways and I love like the slight hesitation every time it comes up because you're nervous about it. Just go with it.
It's just a weird word.
Yeah, it is weird.
W-Y.
I don't like the sound of it.
T-H-E.
Yeah.
I don't like it. Okay. So what's going on in these extra thick brick walls?
Nice.
Is that they are structural. So it's a mass wall essentially. So in addition to it being the exterior finish, it's also carrying the weight of the floor system and the roof and all that stuff. So the way they would build these old houses is that, and the way that Thomas's house is built, which you guys can see from the photo we'll throw up on the website, is that the windows are set into brick openings and everything's brick. And then on the inside of the brick, they have 2x on the flat. In this case, it looks like freaking 2x10s on the flat. No insulation. They put the lath over the flat 2xs, and then they put plaster on that. There is no insulation. So when the wall gets wet, it has a massive amount of heat energy moving through it from the inside to dry it out. So it holds a lot of moisture, releases a lot of moisture both directions. Pretty safe assembly. Pretty much people have been building structures like this for 1 bosmillion years. And then we jack holes, roll up, and we go, this house should be a little tighter. We're trying to revive this old housing stock. We're trying to save all these old houses and make them livable, but also energy efficient. So we add a little insulation, and now what we've done is we've removed the ability of that interior energy to help with the drying. We've dampened it. We put a blanket over the wall. And so now when it gets wet on the outside, the water doesn't dry out as quickly. And when you're in Massachusetts...
This is the key part here.
Yeah.
Get to it.
It freezes.
Yeah, the freeze-thaw cycles are what's the critical factor.
Right.
So you've got these wet bricks, whether it's from rain or snow melt or whatever it is, that freezes, and then things start to blow up on you.
Yeah, and you can see in that the other picture that's not up there right now, the exterior picture, all that black above the entryway and along the whole bottom of the house is evidence that there's water on that brick. Most likely. That's probably like algae or something like that growing because the brick
of that
is
flat
wet.
roof. And
yeah, I think it's just splashing up there and it's getting wet and stuff is growing on it.
The style of the house is, I don't know, what style would you call this? But, there's virtually no overhangs. There's...
Yeah, the brick's getting wet.
The brick's getting wet. It's going to roll right off that roof, hit the ground, bounce back onto the brick. This is the same situation. We talked in a previous episode about protecting brick with stucco. Or sorry, like a parge coat. Same deal. In that case, you'd use a softer material so that it's sacrificial and protects the brick. This doesn't have that. So the brick is susceptible.
Yeah.
It has no overhangs, no real weather protection.
Yep.
It's going to get wet. But doesn't it also further get complicated by the fact that we don't know the quality of these bricks?
Right. Bricks vary substantially.
Yeah,
from era and quality. And
we're talking about 1840.
Yeah.
It's not like there was a brick alliance measuring with density tests to make sure that you use the right formulation.
Did like every town have their own little brick operation rocking and rolling?
Sure, because it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So the softness of the brick matters because it matters how much moisture it will hold, how much it will absorb in the first place versus how much it'll just kind of shed off because it's dense and less porous. So let's talk about, is there anything else we need to explain in terms of like the dangers of this before we start talking possible solutions?
Well, I think it's fun. I mean, yeah, it's kind of, I think we covered the fundamental concern here.
But
is that.
Yeah, there was one other one, which was the beams themselves. If they're, in pockets in those walls, once you insulate, the beam ends themselves are going to maintain the moisture as well. They're not going to dry out, and that could rot. And then there goes your floor system.
So if you thought you had problems with rotten beams in the walls, now you're really going to have problems with them when you insulate because they won't be able to dry at all, and they're going to rot right out.
Yep.
So what is this guy?
So this is real complicated.
What's he got to do?
Well, I'd burn it down.
It's brick.
Well, it's
burn it out.
Knock it down then.
I mean, so I think this is. I think you were talking about for the show who they have to call in here. I mean, this is not a project. I think that he could just kind of maybe do some poking around on the internet, or that we're even qualified to answer.
You can't answer this.
He needs to get a specialist in there to do some serious assessment of the structure to make the appropriate recommendations, and that recommendation may be you shouldn't insulate the wall.
Right, and that's a hard pill to swallow.
That's a hard pill to swallow. You could air seal to the best you can to kind of limit some heat loss, but the recommendation might not be to add any insulation.
Yeah. Well, the joke that Rob's mentioning is that before the show I said there's two kind of, there's a lot of strikes against this guy. He's in Massachusetts.
Period.
That
hard stop.
He's in a climate where he's going to have freeze thaw cycles, and that's I'm bringing that up because if he was in Texas with this house,
different story.
This probably wouldn't be a discussion. It would be like, A, you probably wouldn't even bother insulating it, but B, the worry about freeze thaw is gone.
Right.
Probably challenge Justin on that comment, but I won't.
No, there is. I'm not.
You don't want to insulate houses in Texas?
No, it's not that. When you read this 100-page long document, there's some commentary in there about these kinds of buildings in that climate and how it may or may not have as much as desired effect as you think it would. I think it's more of a cold weather problem that these structures are feeling.
Oh yeah.
Having energy problems. I guess that's what I was hinting at, but since you called me out, I had to
try to defend yourself.
Stumble through a defense there.
Unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
I may add.
Yeah. That's what we do here.
Pop in some new windows. That'll help maybe. They're nice windows.
I would just put storms.
Yeah, put some really nice storms on there.
How dare you, Matt? Matt would put in vinyl.
Man, but these two comments, Matt, with the foam on the exterior and the window replacement call.
Well, the foam, you wouldn't even see it because it would be below grade. That was for the foundation.
I don't think you can just pour foam underground.
What happens around the...
Just because they did it in Vermont or New York doesn't mean you can do it.
That was actually a Department of Energy recommendation.
All right.
Because they were saying don't insulate the inside because you'll have the same problems even in a foundation wall that we're talking about with these above grade walls.
See, Matt actually does research for the show.
How dare
He's got a source.
How dare you?
He's going to start sourcing his comments, which is helpful.
So, anyway, so what I was going to say was that the one thing he's got going for him is that he's in Massachusetts, and Building Science Corporation is also in Massachusetts, and this is what they do. They go to people's houses and they consult, and they will come in there and they will likely do some tests on the brick. So they'll drill some holes, they'll take some samples, they'll tell you the density, the water absorption, and that kind of stuff, and they will tell you, yeah, you're at risk, or I think you'll be okay, and they will kind of help you tailor an assembly solution. I mean, they know there's a wide variety of minor and major things that you can do, and the combination of those things is really important to know. It might be that you repoint the exterior of the brick with like a kind of polymer mortar that helps reduce moisture, and then on the inside you hang the floor system from metal brackets instead of joists and beams going into the wall, and then you're safe to spray foam the inside of the wall. It could be that they say, yeah, you can probably get away with rigid foam if you want to do it yourself, but here's the kind of rigid foam you need to use for your brick. It's not a.
It's so
It's not a formulaic answer.
And I think Martin had mentioned that there was an example of this where there was a historic brick home that in Utica lasted forever, and until they spray foamed it with 3 to 4 inches of closed cell, and then just had a whole host of problems. Right?
Started failing within 2 years, I think.
Holy smokes, man! Yeah. So this guy needs to be super careful, super cautious, and I agree. I hope he hasn't started yet.
Yeah, I mean.
And if he has started, just stop.
And we don't
don't say, "Oh, well, how bad can it be?"
You'll find out.
Yeah,
bad.
Yeah.
Well, and we're sounding pretty doomsday. The truth is that if you get a building scientist out there to assess the situation, it's not that the assembly is going to be crazy that you have to do. It's just that you have to know which one is right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might just end up being, all you need to do is strip back all the lath and have a spray foam contractor come in and put 2 inches of foam on the wall, and then you frame your stud wall and move on with your life, and you're done. But you don't want to do it wrong because the stakes are way too high.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to me that the recommendation here might be, for the first time ever on the podcast, is to don't insulate your house.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Let that conditioned air escape.
Yeah. Well, an alternative, if you
want maximum heat loss.
Yeah.
In the winter.
I mean. I'm assuming he wants to preserve the character and the look of the house.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. But of course.
But the sort of recommendation would be to just insulate the outside.
Well, yeah,
go.
It's funny.
I guess that's we didn't address that.
I was just going to say that right after I said there's no kind of formulaic solution. There really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you can add exterior insulation, and you don't need to call a building scientist. Just do that, but.
Yeah,
I'm guessing you're not going to want to do that in this house.
Make this thing look ultra modern.
That's so tough to do on a house that is this cool.
Well, I mean, you could do like an eaves system, like synthetic stucco, and then stucco it, and you still have the nice windows. You still have the. I'm not saying he's going to want to do it. I'm just saying maybe he doesn't want to call somebody. Maybe he doesn't have a phone.
If he went with a conventional cladding, you know what I mean, like clapboards, and I mean that's a bunch of work, but it could still look like a good house. Mm-hmm. Traditional house.
Still good. It's still good.
Still good. All right.
Sorry, I have a runny nose, Robert.
Unbelievable.
It's allergy season here, and
nobody cares.
CT. All right.
Sorry. I'm sorry. We do care.
Rob is so
mean. That was pretty
to
aggressive. Sorry.
Rob's goal on the show is always to just end the show. Like, how fast can we get to the end?
Oh, no, I love this. This is the best part of my day. Best part of my week.
It's the only hour that's not a meeting.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Pete writes to us. Rob.
Pete. He's got to be in the yard.
Rob thinks be at the lumberyard. Rob thinks every lumberyard has a guy named Pete working there.
Yeah. I think it's a proven fact at this point. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. You got a guy, Pete.
Hi, guys. My question's about crown molding. After reading lots of articles, watching all sorts of videos, and installing a decent amount of crown molding myself, I don't know where that sentence was going.
I think that "do" is supposed to be out of there. I sometimes still struggle.
Oh, yeah. After reading lots of articles, watching all sorts of videos, and installing a decent amount of crown molding, I sometimes still struggle with getting great cope joints, but I'm getting better each time. Anyway, I thought it might be interesting to hear all of your thoughts on how you guys tackle crown molding. Do you ever miter corners or only cope? Do you cut the crown on the flat or set it on an angle against the fence? Looking forward to your thoughts, and thanks for the show.
So at this table, Justin very likely has installed the most crown molding.
We don't know what Matt's qualifications are.
Very little.
I have certainly installed crown molding, but I've kind of just stuck with, I think, the conventional route, which is upside down and backwards on the miter saw.
Nested against the fence?
Yes. And then coped with the coping saw.
What are your feelings on the miters?
I've never mitered crown molding. I suppose you could do it. I've seen people do it and heard of people doing it when they've used like MDF.
Yeah,
trim, or
well, it's all your outsides are mitered, right? Outside
sure,
corners.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. To clarify,
yeah. So I'm not coping my outside corners.
Yeah.
So we should have mentioned that the coping issue. The coping, for anybody who doesn't know, is when you cut one piece of trim in such a way that it fits the profile of the other piece of trim. So instead of an inside corner being two pieces coming together with a 45-degree cut on either one of them, on each one of them, you run one of them continuous into the corner, and the other one is cut with a cope joint that then fits tight against the profile of the first piece. And the idea for this is that expansion and contraction is concealed.
Well, even if your corner's not perfectly square.
Right. It doesn't have to be a perfectly 90-degree corner. It offers more flexibility, and mostly it stays tight all year, too.
Yeah.
It just looks better.
It doesn't open up.
Yeah.
Right, because what will happen with that, the miter connection is that as the wood shrinks and expands, it will open up.
So I think the way that I do it is pretty standard, right?
That's the way I learned to do it.
Okay.
I mean,
A lot
we
of
were
people cut
told-
on the flat.
Yeah.
Do you cut on the flat?
I don't.
Okay.
I've never done it that way, but it just seems more complicated because you got a miter and a bevel then.
Right.
So you've got two
Yeah.
things that you got to set on the saw rather than just one. So that just doesn't seem like
Also,
the best solution.
It also doesn't take I don't think it takes into account the spring angle. So the spring angle of crown molding is the projection of it off the wall. So like imagine looking down the barrel of the crown. It's nailed. The bottom of it's nailed to the wall. The top of it's nailed to the ceiling, and that triangle that is formed by that intersection is
Right.
the backside of the crown is the spring angle, the angle that it springs off of the wall.
So I know, I mean, Aaron Butt, I think we just saw him recently where I guess he was selling a trim profile that didn't have any spring to it. You know, it was just essentially flat stock. So he cut it on the flat.
Yeah, and that would make sense.
I've never really worked with that kind
That
of
would
crown.
suck
but
because then if you have joint compound back there, like how did he get a tight joint?
Got to screed it afterwards.
There's a reason why it's cut the way it is.
Yeah.
So what about coping? There's a bunch of different ways to actually do the cope.
Well, I didn't even get into the nested versus the flat.
Okay.
So
dig in.
So here's my sequence because people get way too confused about this. Because people always love to say the upside down and backwards thing. That's because you got to cut crown upside down and backwards, and that's true. The backwards thing is just upside down.
Yeah.
Just remember that part.
Yeah.
So you want to imagine that the table of your miter saw is the ceiling, and the fence of your miter saw is the wall. So step one is to determine the projection of your crown molding off of the wall. This is your spring angle. So take a cut off of the trim and hold it up against a framing square. So the one leg of the framing square, basically the framing square is acting as the wall where it's going to be installed. Mm-hmm. So that will tell you how far it projects from the wall across the ceiling. And you want to know that measurement from the inside corner to the outside edge of the upper part of the crown molding. That is the distance that you need to then set on your miter saw. Okay, and let me walk you through that. So let's say it's we threw up some pictures here. In the case of this picture, I think it's like 3 inches or 3 1/8 or something. So then what the best sequence is to rip a piece of wood, let's call it 12 inches long, that matches that width. So 3 1/8 inch rip. Then I set that piece of wood against my miter saw fence on the flat.
But you've built an auxiliary fence?
Sorry, yeah, you build an auxiliary fence so you have something to screw down to.
Okay.
Also because oftentimes you don't have enough support in a miter saw fence to press it firmly and nest it. So anyway, so I got, and then sub fence can just be 2 rips of plywood
screwed together
at a 90-degree angle. You just want to make sure that it's not so tall that the motor of the miter saw will clear it.
Yeah.
Which, ask me how I know that. So you rip this piece of wood to 3 1/8 inches, put it on the flat up against the back of the fence. Then you take a second strip of wood and you put it in front of that rip cut and fasten it down to the auxiliary table. Now you have what's basically a cleat. The cleat represents the projection of the crown. So now when you take your crown molding and you put it in place on the miter saw nested up against that fence, it will hold the piece of crown at the exact same angle every single time you make a cut on every single piece. And that's really the key to the whole thing is you need to have it be in exactly the position it's going to be installed in, but upside down. And the reason why it's upside down is because when you're cutting on a 45-degree angle and then you install it, it's probably harder to describe the reason for that than it is to just put it upside down and cut it and look at it and go, oh, okay, I get what we're doing here. But as for coping,
You a flap disc guy?
I've done so many different things. For years, I did the angle grinder with the opposing abrasive sanding discs.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take not the flap ones. The flap ones are too big and wide.
Okay.
You need to be able to get into those little nooks.
Yeah.
And this doesn't that tool won't work if there's a lot of complicated ins and outs on the crown.
For a regular kind of
like
just
a fairly
colonial
standard crown molding. Yeah, I would take the two really thin, probably like 80, 60 grit. I don't remember what the grit is. And you take two of them, put them back to back so you can cut either up or down, pinch them in there against the little arbor, tighten it down. And then I would use the angle grinder to actually cut back the wood. More recently, I've actually been using a coping saw. It's a little more accurate. A lot of people love the Collins coping foot on a jigsaw.
Yeah.
I never really, my jigsaw didn't, back in the days when I was doing a lot of this, it was like the only jigsaw model, some Bosch model that didn't accept the
just
coping foot.
Explain that a little bit. I mean, it's a
God.
replace.
You explain it.
Well, I'll try to explain it. It's essentially, would that be the sole or like the shoe of the? So you replace that with
the base blade or whatever it is.
Yeah, the base blade, which is flat on a jigsaw. You replace that with the Collins coping foot, which is kind of domed. So you could really pivot that blade in really tight corners, and I've never used it.
The other thing is I use a top handle jigsaw as opposed to a barrel grip jigsaw.
Okay.
And so when you're using that coping foot, you're
you
holding
really
the
upside
jigsaw
down.
upside down so the blade is pointed towards you.
Yeah.
And the trigger's in the wrong spot for me to do that.
I gotcha.
It doesn't, I pull the trigger to turn it on. Others have like a switch, like you slide so I just never got into that. But people that use it swear by it. So I believe it's great.
And I think if you get used to it, you could kind of,
you can fly.
You could fly.
Yeah.
I've seen one cabinet maker who's written for the magazine, Brent Benner. He
Unbelievable. You got your cell phone in here vibrating on the table?
Oh, is it? Sorry.
Unbelievable, Jeff.
He uses one of those really narrow Makita belt sanders.
Oh,
Have you ever seen one of those?
Yep.
Like an inch and a
I saw Kit Camp use one of those too.
I think by like 20 inches. It's kind of a little wild looking, but
I forget what that's called. It's like a finger sander or something.
Yeah.
It's a finger taker offer.
Yeah. So he uses that, and again, like
That thing's awesome.
yeah.
You can still get them. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you can still get them. It just seemed like, I don't know. Again, once you get versed in it, you could really move.
Yeah.
I've seen people, especially if there's a crown with no spring to it, or I've actually even seen people build some jigs and do their cope on the table saw.
I was going to say,
No, don't
I
do
saw
that.
that, and it was, it actually turned out okay. And then he finished it off with just a file.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Yeah, you're gonna have to get a rasp or something in there.
Yeah. But I was.
You say
rather
don't do
impressed.
that.
Well, because
how did he do it? Just grab the jig.
So I've seen it on the flat when there's no kind of spring and it's just a flat piece of stock.
Meaning that you saw this a couple weeks ago with Aaron.
Yep.
Okay.
Where you eliminate the fence and you just kind of nibble away.
Eliminate the fence.
Yeah. So you're not.
slide it out of the way.
So the fence
Am I
is
sliding it towards am I sliding it like I would feed a piece of wood into the saw normally?
Yeah.
And I'm just pulling it back and
sort
forth
of.
in and
Yeah,
out.
you're just sliding it across
freehand.
freehand.
Okay, and you're asking me what I don't like about that? You're freehanding on the table saw.
But you're not. You're not using the saw in a way that you necessarily would get
Exactly.
kickback.
Yeah.
You're not pushing it through the blade.
Yeah, you're just kind of like going basically perpendicular to the saw blade.
Which is totally what it's made for.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. That's what the saw is designed to do.
Well,
Just
have
slide
you-
a piece sideways across the
Okay,
jig.
but speaking of that, have you? So there is a safe method. My understanding
Are we going to
is
get to the whole fine woodworking speed cope thing or speed tenon that they do?
Just talking about the use of the table saw, about creating your own cove molding. You
Yes.
know that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's clamped down,
Yeah.
and it's not at a perpendicular angle. It's at like a skew angle.
That's scarier to me than watching someone cope a piece of trim.
There's nowhere for that piece of coped trim to go because you've got two sacrificial boards. Talk about getting in the weeds. You got two sacrificial boards, and then the piece of trim that you're cutting a cove on is running diagonally across the blade, but it's pinched between two places, and you're only taking off like a barely anything at a time.
Yeah, you're doing this a similar thing with
It's not quite
crown.
the same.
A little bit
Not quite the
by
same,
hand.
but
yeah. The way I saw it, the guy had a jig, and it was fastened in there pretty good. But I mean, still, it was by hand. I mean, it was just still in this sort of, framework that he was then just sort of waving around.
Why?
I will
what is that going to save you?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the amount of time that it took him to do that in the video that I saw, I could do it faster with a coping saw.
Yeah, coping saw is so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm saying that I've seen it done that way.
Unbelievable.
Give it to me. Come on.
I mean, I've done this before myself, but I've done all these things, but that doesn't mean you should do it.
There's for sure better alternatives. I've seen it done. I've never done it. I agree that there's faster, safer alternative methods.
I'm in a safety mindset lately because I was working in my shop last week and had another little close call.
A little close call.
I mean, it was that's not minor, but
we'll be the judge of that.
Okay. I don't.
How minor it was.
It was a reminder to wear safety glasses. One of those reminders.
Oh.
Working in the shop, you guys know, I've been remodeling the shop, and I was I was breaking down some old the sub base that I had made for a cabinet. So it was plywood screwed together. And I was cutting it into small pieces with a circular saw so that I could throw it away. Mm-hmm. So I was just ripping across it, cutting it. I had the battery powered circular saw, which has a blade break, and it almost makes you feel like it's not a real tool,
right?
Because like it's just so
light,
so benign looking, and so easy to work with. And I didn't put safety glasses on to make these 3 or 4 cuts, just like zip, 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 and the blade hit a hidden screw. It was on the backside, and I had a little fleck of metal fly up and land like a millimeter from my eye on my face. And it was a burning hot piece of metal that left a burn mark like almost on my eyeball.
Yeah, you got lucky.
Yeah. It was like, ow, that hurt versus I have serious eye problems now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Just from, every time, too. It's not like I go, oh, I forgot to put them on. I go, I don't need them.
So they weren't like resting on your forehead or anything?
No, it's just I don't want to walk 3 feet and grab them off the shelf over there.
You just got to get safety glasses and put them everywhere in the shop so they're always within arm reach.
I think that, honestly, is what I was up against, is that
you just can reach it?
I had a bunch of pairs, and a bunch of them got scratched, and I threw them away, and I don't have another fresh supply of, like, a bunch of pairs.
Yeah.
And like, it sounds so stupid, but that little
open the bag in your shop and just
slight barrier,
throw them.
That little slight barrier and you get away with it most of the time. So it's easy to. I don't know.
You need one of those strings. Put it around your neck. Have them there all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
I like to just not wear contacts sometimes in the shop and just
wear impact rated contacts.
Just wear glasses so that you're always wearing them. Any old way.
Matt laughed at my joke. You didn't. Matt,
I wish they made those.
Yeah, I know.
You already fired Matt. You can't give him a raise now.
Well, it's your call anyway.
Did we answer everything with the crown molding? What else was there?
Yeah, we got way off track, as always, so let's get it back on track.
All right. We didn't really explain why we don't want to cut it on a flat, but for me, I don't like, anytime I can avoid beveling my miter saw, I do it. I like to cut everything on the flat on the table.
That,
There are charts out there that tell you what to set it at for the various spring angles. So, I mean,
I love to set
reading that.
I love to set my bevel, which is like, usually the scale is about 1.5 inches long.
Right. And
somehow you're supposed to read like, no, not 33.5, 33.6, Matt.
Right.
But do you have it at the right angle?
Yeah.
Let me get on my magnifying glass. Yeah. So it's just easier to set it to 45 one direction or the other and be done. All right. Chris writes, I've recently started listening and I have a question about clapboard siding. It's a bit of backstory. About 2 years ago, we purchased a house which is over 100 years old and was covered in aluminum siding. Underneath the aluminum is still the original painted cedar clapboard siding. My wife and I decided to start removing the aluminum siding and restore the wood clapboards, beginning with a small section to test the waters, as it were. The small section turned into about 500 square foot area when we discovered a rotted corner post due to poorly maintained downspouts and had to remove a bunch of the siding to get in there to do the repair. Underneath the clapboard was building paper, which has largely disintegrated, installed over 1 inch thick tongue and groove board sheathing. My wife and I were able to remove a majority of the clapboards with little or no damage inflicted by us, since most of the nails had rusted out anyway, and we cut the nails off that were being stubborn. We're in the process of stripping the old paint, priming both sides, and reinstalling them over number 15 building paper. Okay, question. First, was using number 15 building paper the best choice? I didn't give it a whole lot of thought because I was in a rush to start reinstalling the siding due to worries about weather exposure. Second question, am I nuts for thinking it's a good idea to remove all the other siding, put a proper WRB behind it, and be able to back prime the clapboards? We're actually finding that stripping the paint is slightly easier when it's off the house, especially along the bottom edges. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. So that was kind of a long question, but it's one that rings true for me because I was in this situation of trying to decide what to do with the siding of my house years ago. And I'm guessing Matt will be in that same position sometime soon.
Yeah.
Your house
that's right.
Vinyl.
Covered with vinyl, yeah.
Yeah. And no idea exactly what's under there, other than I know there's foam right underneath of it.
So
and the clapboards may be under there.
If you have wood siding covered by vinyl or aluminum, has there ever been in history an example of that vinyl or aluminum siding being installed for any reason other than the wood siding is not in good shape? Otherwise, why would you ever do it?
I think it comes down to
like, when is it not hiding a problem?
Yeah, your neighbors are doing it. Well,
You got some kind of a bulk
what
deal.
Yeah.
what are you?
I mean, why would I not
qualifying?
do it? Who wouldn't want vinyl and aluminum?
What are you qualifying as a problem? Because it could be like, you know what,
peeling paint.
Okay, peeling
Or
paint.
I need a paint job.
Right. Okay, so they just want to avoid the maintenance, cover it all up. Because there's the other factor is like, wow, there's like some damage here, like actual damage, either like split boards or, I mean, hopefully they're not like, wow, that's really rotten. Let me just cover it up.
Well, it's an interesting thing because, they said a rotten
Corner post or something?
So what did that, likely it was not, let's give them a benefit of the doubt. The previous owners probably did not cover up a rotten corner post with vinyl and say, let's just pretend that's not there. What probably happened was they had some failing siding paint and then said, I don't want to deal with this. Let's just erase this whole wood thing and cover it up with nice low maintenance vinyl. Mm-hmm. And so what was maybe just the early signs of a water intrusion problem that they didn't want to deal with was then concealed and then became a huge water problem, all in the name of, I don't want to deal with this.
Perhaps, but you're also thinking that the homeowners had any kind of involvement in the project other than I don't want to pay to have this painted, so I'll just have someone cover it. And that contractor was like, oh, there's some rot here, but I'm not a carpenter. I'm here to get this siding up, so that's what I'm going to do.
Okay, well let me back up then. I'm going to come up with a situation where it makes sense to me to put up vinyl or aluminum. A safe, not makes sense, but
is it purely aesthetic?
If I have an old house. I have a house, and the paint on the siding has started to dull and just look like it needs to be refreshed. I don't see any major signs of cracking and peeling and bubbling paint. I don't see signs of rot. I'm going, you know what? I paid to paint this place once. This paint's really not holding up great. It's starting to look chalky and dulled out. I don't want to go through this to get the painting thing again. I'm just going to cover it so I don't have to deal with this. Okay. I might allow that.
Shocking.
But if there's anything beyond that, if it's peeling, bubbling, if you see any signs of water intrusion or water exfiltration through the siding, which is what you're going to get what your problem usually is when you have bubbling or peeling, and then you cover it, all you're doing is burying the problems, putting lipstick on a pig. So if you want to avoid a goat rodeo, Rob, you got to deal with the actual problem. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. How did we get down this road?
I don't know. That's not this guy's question now. 15-pound felt.
Yeah, which we've talked about on the show before, and I think Justin has acknowledged that it's not an outdated or material. Totally does its job perfectly well. Would you?
I love it. It's far superior to house wrap in some ways. It's the original smart vapor barrier. It will change its permeability based on how wet it gets. And this is going to strike way too close to home for our friend over here, Jeff, who just showed us pictures of how he's going to be spending his weekend, which is...
He has holes in his house.
He has holes in his plywood sheathing because water got behind his deck ledger.
Plywood or OSB?
He has plywood.
Really?
Yeah, that's what's even more shocking is it was that bad that the plywood looks like OSB would look. he had was apparently water getting behind his deck ledger, and it was being trapped between the plywood sheathing and the house wrap. And that happens because house wrap is only designed to allow moisture vapor to pass. If you get liquid water behind it, and by the way, that might mean water vapor going through it and then condensing, it can't get back out again unless it's in vapor form. That's it. Will not allow liquid to pass. So goes in there as liquid or vapor and condenses, and that's it. Now Jeff's entire weekend is ruined, and nobody wants that.
I think it's more than a weekend too.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big job. Sorry,
nightmare.
Jeff. Sorry, Jeff.
So what the difference between felt paper is that felt paper will allow some moisture to kind of it'll absorb a little bit and then release it again. So in some ways it's great. And somebody will say, "Well, you can't air seal felt."
Yeah, that's what I was.
You can't air seal house wrap either. I mean,
you could tape it.
You can. You can air seal house wrap. I'm doing massive air quotes here.
Meaning it's not going to be a 100%.
It is possible, although highly difficult and unlikely to get it right. It is. You'd have to caulk and tape every single seam and transition. You'd have to. You'd have to make sure that
it'll never be 100% airtight.
No.
Yeah. And it's going to be really hard when you're doing it piecemeal like this. They're not starting with like completely bare walls.
They're not going to strip the entire house at once.
And so they're going to have a lot of tape.
So is your recommendation to like just chill out on that side of it? I mean, don't.
Well, but here's the thing. He's saying that it's making their life easier when stripping the paint off the clapboards.
To remove all the cladding.
Right. And I considered going down this road. Like I could sit here on scaffolding and ladders and blah, 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 and scrape into all these corners. Or I could pop the siding off, run it through a thickness planer with the same old dull beat up set of blades after, using every piece. And maybe there's some other method, maybe run it over a jointer or run it quickly, take a real quick pass over a table saw in order to clean up the bottom edge. And then, take the time to put up a rain screen.
That's what I was going to mention.
And then reinstall the siding. And now I've done so much to enhance the durability of that siding. Like I just gave that siding another couple of 100 years.
And the paint job.
Yeah. Which you're not going to get if you don't pull it off. Maybe it's even the opportunity to, hey, I want to add some rigid foam on the outside and up my R value. Yeah. That was the other reason I was considering it.
I got you.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I just did it in place. But I don't have if he's willing, I don't think it's insane to pull it off. Especially if you're doing it yourself. I don't think I would pay somebody necessarily, but
they might find.
Seems like they're on the right track.
But I guess what I would say is, from the pictures that we have here, it's a nice house. It looks like they're doing nice work.
It looks way better than the aluminum.
Yeah,
I think.
But I think I would consider creating some back ventilation behind that siding. If you're going to go to the trouble of taking it off, the natural next best step is to give it some room to breathe behind it so it can dry and the paint will last longer, as Rob said.
Yeah. But going that route, taking it all off, you may find the reason that they put the aluminum on to begin with. It may not be on the front of the house. It may be on the back of the house. You know, it could be on the not sunny side of the house.
Right.
Or
you start peeling off the aluminum, you're like, why would anybody cover this? It's gorgeous. And then you go to the back and you go, because they put an addition on and they didn't have any siding to match.
Right. And then you may have some other problems that really need to be addressed, and you will want to address them sooner rather than later. That may not be the only post that was
it might
messed up.
It might ruin your day, but in the end, it's going to be something you're going to be glad you found.
Right.
Is those problems, Like you go into a house, I remember my grandparents' house is like, why wouldn't they pull up this carpet? They have this gorgeous hardwood floor under here. Well, it's because they put an addition on, and that addition doesn't have hardwood floor. And they couldn't figure out how to make it match, so they covered the whole thing.
Yeah.
So don't start just ripping up the carpet and high-fiving. All right. That's all we got for this week. So just a reminder that the show is nothing without all you listeners. So if you have questions or topics, send us a note, fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. We got all sorts of daily shenanigans to feed your craving for building nerdiness. And please don't forget about that awesome offer we have right now for subscription to the magazine. $30 for a year. That's 20% off. Go to finehomebuilding.com/pod offer. And that's it. Oh, sorry, Rob.
One last thing. Our little event.
Oh,
down
yes,
there
I keep
in Nashville.
forgetting. Rob and I are going to be down in Nashville, Tennessee at the end of October 26th.
26th and 27th.
We'll be doing an event for professionals. Well, it's not just for professionals, right?
It's for
anybody
anybody.
can come, but
it's called the Emerging Professionals event.
Right.
We're sponsoring it in partnership with Huber Engineered Woods.
Yep.
It's at the Remodeling Show, Deck Expo, JLC Live. It's the kind of 3 events in one. You could probably put a registration link up on the show notes page, and if you follow that link, it'll give you the opportunity as you register for the conference. You'll get prompted with opting in to attend the event. And it will also come with a promo code that you could use to get you free access to the whole show.
Yeah. So come to the show for free.
For free. Drink beer with Justin and I.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be beer there.
We're going to be doing podcasts. So you guys can come down, meet us.
A couple of the ambassadors will be down there with us.
Yep.
Hang out with them, hang out with each other.
Not only that, but it's just a killer show.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Tons of new products and materials. First of all, Jeff will be there.
Jeff's going to be there.
So
he can show you pictures of his rotting house.
Yep. Possibly hire you to come help out.
Yeah. Make it.
So for that, you need to go to finehomebuilding.com/podcast, and Mike will have the link for all that registration stuff. So get on top of that because time is running out. October 26th and 27th, Nashville, Tennessee. Hope to see you all there. Until next time, this is Justin for Rob and Matt saying keep craft alive and happy building.